All right, so here's a quick tutorial on kind of Unity 6 released this thing called project-wide actions, which is basically the same thing as like the input system package, Unity's new input system that they had like a little while ago, but it's a lot easier to kind of implement and use. Um, One thing is, at least for the kind of default 2D template or whatever that I installed, they start with the input system package installed, and they start you with a input system action. Um, and one thing you'll notice here is you have a edit in project settings window. Um, so before you'd kind of open the thing yourself and then you'd get this thing. Um, but here you can edit it in the project settings window because it's a project-wide action. So it's kind of like it's almost like a static variable, I guess, but it's the same thing across the entire project. Um, so I guess I'll just explain how these kind of input actions work in the first place. So after opening it, you've got your action maps, which is kind of like just, I guess you could say, folders of actions. You could make it different things and switch between them. Um, and then inside the action maps, you have each of these actions, which is kind of, you can bind multiple bindings to an action. So, for example, this jump action, which I'm going to use later to make my square jump, um, has this space, the keyboard button space, and the gamepad button south, which for Xbox controller is A. Um, those are the two bindings ascribed to it, so either one of these will set off the jump action. Um, and you can kind of set the path of the binding just by you click on it. You can search them, but you can also just click listen and then click the button you want to be the binding. If I just hit space, it just shows up there, real easy. Um, and then you can also make different types of actions. So this is a button action, like true or false, basically a Boolean. This is a axis 1D, or just an axis. So if you kind of click on, I don't know what the pass-through is, but you can do action type value, and then there's all the different types of values. You could do vector 2, 3, whatever. And then the third one is just another example of value. I set up a vector 2. And the nice thing about these is, so for a 1D axis, you can like set up multiple keybind keys to be like the left and right of axis. So -1 is A and +1 is D. Um, and that's pretty much it's the binding's the same system as the other ones. You just hit listen, then click the button. But you can also bind just a straight axis value if you're using something like an Xbox controller, where here, instead of having to bind two values, I can just bind the straight X value of the left stick, which here you have an option of Xbox controller specifically or just kind of general gamepad, but either works really. Um, and so, and the same goes for vector 2. So instead of binding just the X value of the left stick, I'm binding the X and Y value of the left stick, so I can implement an easy control system that way. So I'll just do a little example of the control system. So with the keyboard, I can hit space and I'll jump. I can hit A and D and I'll move left and right. And then with the Xbox controller, I made it that you can just control all. Oh Lord. Oh, okay. Man, that's fast. You can just control all the 2D, two-dimensional directions, up, down, left, right, with just the left stick. And you can also jump hitting the A button. So that's kind of the two bindings for jump we looked at earlier. Um, and so what this kind of looks like in the code is over here with the Visual Studio. I have a rigid body component set up, but there's plenty of tutorials on that, so I won't really go over that. The thing you'll want is an input action map, and that's referencing kind of this thing here. So I'm getting the input action map, my input. I'm just making a variable. Then the start, I'm doing input system dot actions dot find action map. And the nice thing is you can just do it directly. You don't need some fancy reference because it's project-wide action, so it's the same everywhere. Um, and so then I have the action map, and then from that action map I can do things like dot find actions. Now I have access to all of these actions in here. You can also save each action individually as I think just like input action if you wanted to. You just name it and then assign it. But dot find action isn't too annoying, so I'm just going to leave it like that for now. And so here's the simple jump function, which is if my action map dot find action jump was performed this frame, then it will add an upwards force. And then the left and right, or the all directional vector 2, oh wait, that's this one, is just here. So it's just a force in the vector 2 of the just the action, this thing, this one. And then here is just a axis. So it's got vector 2 to right times 100, and then this will either be -1 or 1 depending on A or D or the X position of the left stick of the Xbox controller. To get these values out, that's what this read. Oh my gosh, that's what this. Stop. This. Oh God. Okay. I can't hover over it without it just obliterating everything. This read value here just kind of reads the value stored in this action. You just kind of have to specify what type of value you're expecting, and then that's what you'll get out of it. Pretty straightforward. For an axis value, it comes out just as a float. Don't put axis. I made that mistake earlier. It thinks it's talking about 3D space for some reason. Just float works. And that's pretty much the basics of setting up action. So if you're already familiar with kind of interactions, that's all you really need to know. But I'll just continue a little bit with what these interactions do. So interactions is basically a way you can put certain conditions on actions. So let's say I wanted to make it that every time to jump, instead of just pressing the button, I have to like double tap it. So like before with Unity's oldest input system, just a input.get key, you'd have to kind of make your own like logic for this, but this has just got a nice thing. I can just I can just set the tap count, and then there's more specific settings that you can make kind of input setting files for, but the default stuff works for now. So now if I just add this interactor and then I go back to the play button, right now just tapping it doesn't, oh, okay, if I tap it slowly it doesn't jump, but if I double tap it then it jumps. So that's just double tap jump. Wouldn't recommend doing that for a jump system, but it's just an example. And so there's multiple kinds of interactors, hold, etc. And what kind of goes hand in hand with these interactors is these was performed or whatever this frame. So if I type in was, there's kind of 4 of them. So was performed this frame is basically asking, was the action and all of its requisite interactions completed this frame? If it was, true. Pretty straightforward. Was completed this frame is kind of, I guess, the opposite, or it's similar to like a was released or get key up. It's basically like, did you complete the action and then let go of the button? So what that looks like with a hold interactor is if I was doing was perform this frame, then it just automatically trigger after I'd held it for, okay, wait a minute, something's not right here. Was completed this frame. Maybe I didn't actually save it. Okay, I think I just didn't actually save it. So there it was just triggering once I'd held the button long enough, but now if I hold the button, nothing happens. But once I release the button, it jumps. However, if I just tap and release it really quickly, it doesn't do anything. I have to hold it for long enough for it to trigger the action and then let go of the button. So that's kind of what the different was's was. Okay. This tongue twister. Oh gosh. And then the was press this frame and the was release this frame is basically it's getting the action, but it's ignoring interactors. That's how I understand it anyway. So if I do the was press this frame and then I still have the hold interaction up, but now if I go into here and I kind of, oh, wait. Maybe not. Maybe I'm misunderstanding what's going on here. Oh my goodness, I didn't save it again. Okay, okay. I've saved scripts. That's rule number one, save scripts before opening them in the editor. Okay, here we go. So right now, it's just immediately when I press the button, it's jumping, and that's happening because it's kind of ignoring the interactors because it's just using the direct was pressed. There's a few other functions with it, but those are the main ones, and they're pretty easy to just kind of experiment with. One important note about this was press this frame kind of stuff. These have to go inside the update function. It's basically because the timing of the visual update frames is the same timing as kind of the input frames. So if you put the input frames inside the physics fixed update frames, they kind of like miss, I guess. I don't quite know exactly, but basically if you put this in here, it does not work. At least it's never worked for me. And that's pretty much it. So yeah, and I guess you can click these plus buttons to make new actions. There's one more part, I guess, is processors, which is just kind of like extra stuff. Like you can do a clamp so that can't go past a certain value. You can do a scaling so you can make it like a higher number possibly. These functions should be familiar if you've worked with Unity for a little bit, but you can also just look them up. But yeah, that's pretty much it. It's pretty nice that Unity 6 finally made their input system a little bit more kind of standardized across projects, so you don't have to do 5 extra steps just to check if you're pressing spacebar or not. Alrighty.